On a sombre day in France following the tragedy on Bastille Day. The occasion where words are almost impossible to find the right ones, and the director of the tour, Christian Prudhomme, has managed to do that. Hello and welcome to stage 13 of the Tour de France. It's been a much awaited individual time trial, and as stated by the tour director, the race must go on. It's into the Ardèche today. The wind will be blowing once again. The course is tough. Individual time trial day starting in Bourg-Saint-Denis, making its way through to Le Caverne de Pont-d'Arc. It's 37.5 kilometres, and this is anything but flat. It's not a mountain stage against the clock, but it is lumpy. A 7-kilometre climb to get things started, across the plateau, descent, and then climb through to the finish.
Now racing up towards the finish here. The clock will come into play. He's already conceded 2.5 minutes to the day's possible winner in Tom Dumoulin, but he's more concerned about the arrival. I think he's going to concede over 2 minutes to Chris Froome with this performance, and that for him will be simply very, very bad, and probably will lose him the Tour de France. As he comes into the home straight now, he's racing for 15th place. It'll slip away. It's a long way up to the finish here.
Yeah, well, Phil, don't count him out quite so far away from Paris, because the next individual time trial is a mountain time trial, which could give him the advantage over Chris Froome.
I love your optimism, Paul. As we watch here, Tom Dumoulin's time get well to the better of 3 minutes and 7 seconds, conceded to Quintana, by Quintana. Now, the big thing is, what has Yates done? And that's the most important thing. He's the next man to finish.
Here he is, Phil, out on the course. So Yates just hugging the barriers, getting in there as close as he can to shorten the distance around those corners. Once again, once the pain and the speed starts to drop away, gets out of the saddle, forcing himself to find every last little bit of energy.
Well, Mollema has climbed over Quintana in the overall classification with that ride. Bardet will not have improved. He's slower than Quintana. Well, enjoying an early tea, I think, Tom Dumoulin, because he knows now he must be worried about Froome, because Froome was only 40-odd seconds down at the last check, and if he's climbed this hill really well, he'll be very close to his time. But a quick calculation at 3 kilometres to go, I'm not sure he could get up in the time he had left.
Well, it would be one of those amazing comebacks, because in fact Froome, although he's improved his position at each of the individual time checks, his time deficit to Tom Dumoulin was further and further back. At 10 seconds to begin with, then 17 seconds, then 48 seconds. 48 seconds is an awful large amount to pull back in the final kilometre of this climb.
Adam Yates continues. Remember, he's a British rider riding for an Australian team, Orica Bike Exchange. They lost their leader yesterday in Simon Gerrans, the leader on the road, the team captain. He crashed, went out of the Tour for the 3rd time in his career with a crash injury, a broken collarbone. This man now is the team leader and having to ride for that team. As he comes up towards the finish now, he's looking at 7th, 8th. It's a long way up this home straight for Adam Yates. But hey, the first good news is Chris Froome never caught him. The next good news is I think his time's going to be pretty good.
And maybe the other piece of good news to throw in there, Phil, is he will actually extend his lead in the Best Young Rider competition, because he's gone faster than every other rider less than 25 years of age, and that's what that competition is all about.
This white jersey could be taken all the way to Paris, and that would be some terrific award. Yates is coming up now. The places are slipping away. It's all about time, not places. Just going to be on 53 minutes, conceding shortly 3 minutes to Tom Dumoulin. 21. Adam Yates is going to get inside that, approximately 53.21. 3 Quintana's time. Beats Quintana 53.16. And straight into the straight now. It's still a little way. Is the drive 3 minutes behind Adam Yates. He's now closing it down. He's probably picked back more than 2 minutes, which would put him around a long 50-minute ride here for Chris Froome. He hasn't won the day, but my goodness me, he may have won the Tour de France with a week to go, because he is building on his overall lead with this finish. He can see the clock now as he looks up and finds a few more seconds. He's racing for the second best time here, which is 51.46, and he's gonna just about get inside the time of Oliveira. And that'll do him, because it means he's ahead of every one of his competitors in this year's Tour de France. He gained time on them yesterday with a little help from the judges, and he gains time on them today with a little help from his legs.
Well, there you go, a proficiat coming from Beniceulen there, a former well-known journalist from Holland. And proficiat, if you don't speak Dutch, means congratulations. So congratulations to Tom Dumoulin, who gets himself a second stage victory. But for Chris Froome, finishing in second place on the stage with that performance, he will extend his lead over everybody else in the overall classification tonight. And it looks very much as if Bauke Mollema will move up into second place with his ride this afternoon. And Adam Yates should just hold on to third place as he extended his lead over Nairo Quintana. But this man was the man who set the bar over all of the time checks. The fastest at 4.3 miles into the race, 7 kilometers. Fastest at 18 kilometers, then at 28 kilometers. Then when he came up to the finishing line, he was faster than everybody else. And more importantly, he got across the line to win himself that second stage, and maybe start to put a little bit of a line between here and Rio de Janeiro, because one thing he's dreaming about is trying to win the individual time trial in Rio in a couple of weeks' time at the Olympic Games. But more importantly, Froome extends his lead in the overall classification as we look our way down on the River Ardèche, and the beautiful gorges here. 103 the difference between the first two, and 131 back to Nelson Oliveira. And as a reference, by the way, a 4 times national champion of Portugal in the individual time trial, and a teammate to Nairo Quintana.
From a victory in Andorra already on the Tour de France, but this is really what you came from, mission accomplished, a winner on the time trial.
Yeah, you're speaking with, at one side, a very happy man, and at one side, a very, very sad, it's a very sad day. And yeah, I woke up to the terrible news from Nice, and it was a very just question, I think, whether we should race or not today. And at the end, I think also a very just decision to race. I think we cannot let terrorists decide our lives here in our society. But yeah, it's terrible what happened, and it shadows the day a bit, or not only a bit, but a lot. And I think that's yeah, that's the only right thing. And yeah, so you're speaking with a two-faced man today. Of course, I'm happy with the win. It's what I came for in this Tour de France. At the same time, my thoughts are with everyone involved in the yeah, horrific attack in Nice.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, quite right. And this is how he did it. Put the memories of that tragedy in Nice to the back of his mind and concentrated on the job in hand. Went out on the course, and he caught, first of all, Luis Leon Sanchez, himself a very respectable former time trial champion of Spain. And when he came up to the line, he'd set the bar exceptionally high at every individual time check. The fastest man all the way out on the course, and he went faster than Nelson Oliveira, the early leader. But setting that bar at 27.8 miles an hour, and that's around about 54 kilometers an hour. at 50 minutes and 15 seconds. There were not very many men in this world could have gone faster than that, but he beat Chris Froome, the defending Tour de France champion, by 1:03. Rowan Dennis of Australia crept into the top 5 there with a 5th place, so 1:41 back, and that's a very good reference. Bauke Mollema, brilliant ride, the best of all of the other contenders, in 6th place, and Geraint Thomas in 7th, just 2 minutes flat behind. Tony Martin, a 3-time world time trial champion, in 9th place, and Steve Cummings in 10th place at 2 minutes 24 seconds.
Well, there's the situation, and it looks as though Chris Froome tonight is going to lead by nearly 2 minutes in the Tour de France after an outstanding ride, and what we must say is a collapse by the challengers in this rather short time trial of 23.3 miles or 37.5 kilometres. Well, that's the situation on the Tour de France, and what has been a very, very sad day for the world, not just for France. Let's go back to Matthew Keenan.
Well spoken by Tom Dumoulin at the end of the stage. It's a bittersweet day for Tom Dumoulin. He achieved what he came to the Tour de France to achieve, but it's certainly been put into context by what happened in Nice just last night. Here's a look at the general classification. This is the general classification before today's stage got underway. So this has certainly changed, because Adam Yates is not 47 seconds behind Chris Froome. Chris Froome has extended his lead, and Bauke Mollema, with his performance today, has climbed up the general classification. In fact, there's quite a significant shuffling of the top 10, and a good performance by TJ Van Garderen today. He's moved himself up a little bit in the overall standings. Likewise, Richie Porte. Romain Bardet, well, he fought well in the time trial, which is a discipline that he normally loses big chunks of time in. Fabio Aru, it looked disastrous at that final intermediate time check, but he came home so strongly. So I'm looking forward to seeing confirmation of the top 10 in the overall standings. Stage result, Chris Froome was certainly the best of the men racing for the general classification, and of his nearest rivals in terms of that battle for yellow, Bauke Mollema was in 6th position on the stage, and Chris Froome managed to gap him by an extra 51 seconds. So he has more than a 1 minute and 50-second advantage over Bauke Mollema, who I think has moved up to 2nd place. Here it is, a 1:47 the gap to Bauke Mollema, 2:45 to Adam Yates. It's then Nairo Quintana at almost 3 minutes. Valverde, followed by Van Garderen. It's then Bardet at 4:04. Porte moves into the top 10. Dan Martin is in 9th position, and Fabio Aru has slipped to 10th at 5 minutes and 16 seconds behind. Hello and welcome to stage 14 of the Tour de France. This is Matthew Keenan with you, where today all the action kicks off in Montélimar. Chris Froome now leads Bauke Mollema, who's moved up to 2nd position. It's a 1 minute and 47-second gap between those two. It's then Adam Yates with Nairo Quintana at almost 3 minutes behind. Yesterday, no formal podium presentation as we normally see. There was a minute's silence paying tribute to the victims of the attack in Nice. Stage 14, and as you can see from the map, it is virtually directly north, starting in Montélimar, making its way through to the Parc d'Oiseau. A blockhead wind throughout the stage, and the last of our stages of more than 200 kilometres. 208 kilometres. In fact, the second last. There's another one to come as we go to Switzerland. Clear blue skies getting the race underway. 5 stages this year of more than 200 kilometres, and there was a minute's silence once again at the start of the stage today with all the riders together, and Christian Prudhomme wearing the black armband as he did yesterday. It was a sombre mood on the Tour de France yesterday. It was a strange atmosphere, in fact, and for good reason, as the Tour did what it could to pay its respects to those that lost their lives and their families, of course, in Nice. This is the situation of the race. Breakaway group of 4 riders out to an advantage of 4 minutes and 46 seconds. It's quite a strong group. At the back of the group, this is Jeremy Waugh from the FDJ team. Just in front of him is Cesare Benedetti from Bora Argon 18. In the green colours from Cannondale Drapac, it's Alex Howes. And the most experienced in the group, number 74 from IM Cycling, the Swiss rider, Martin Alminger. Martin Alminger at the back of the group is the best placed in the overall standings. 1 hour, 31 minutes and 38 seconds behind Chris Froome. So the responsibility to contain this breakaway won't be falling to Sky and the yellow jersey holder of Froome. It will be for the teams of the sprinters, those that think that this is their chance to get the win. Arguably, the rider is Andre Greipel, and it's his birthday today. 34 years of age, so happy birthday to Andre Greipel. Romans-sur-Isère, the small town that which is the home of Philippe Saint-André, who's the former captain of the French rugby team. He was the captain of the French rugby team from 2011 through to 2015. The Jacquemart Tower that we're now getting a chance to take a look at. The tower overlooking the town since 1429. It stands at some 37 metres tall. And that jack of the clocks that you can see on there, there's still around about 50 of these remaining in France, but this is the biggest one. It stands at 2.6 metres tall. It's also the oldest. It's been a slow start to the stage because of the headwind and, of course, the accumulated fatigue of the battle that they've had over the past few days with vicious crosswinds, which have made the racing very dangerous. So although the headwind makes for a long stage, I'm sure there's a fair few riders that are quite relieved about the headwind, as the headwind makes the racing conditions safer. Much safer than a tailwind or a crosswind, particularly the crosswind. Another chance to take a look at this tower with the jack of the clocks, which stands alongside the big bell. The tower dates back to 1429, but the jack of the clocks is a lot younger than that. It's only a few hundred years old. None of the riders in this breakaway group of four have been stage winners at the Tour de France in the past, and they know that their odds of upsetting the sprinters today are slim, but they were never going to win the stage if they just stayed back in the peloton. So this is their best chance. Benedetti at the back of the group, we saw him in the breakaway on stage 2. That was the breakaway that almost made it, when we were saying exactly what I just said. They don't have much of a chance. 33.15 kilometres, the average speed so far on the stage. Benedetti in the black colours from Bora Argon 18. He was in the break with Jesper Stuyven when we saw Jesper attack his breakaway companions and get caught with just 450 metres to go. It was Peter Sagan who went on to win the stage ahead of Julien Alaphilippe. And it's the three teams of the big sprinters who are doing the chasing at this point. Dimension Data, edX Quickstep and Lotto Soudal. You can then see the full contingent of the men in black, the Sky Squad, looking after the yellow jersey of Chris Froome. They're not doing any chasing. They're saving as many of their resources as possible as we're back into the mountains tomorrow with a big day of climbing on the agenda for stage 15.
For me, he already is the revelation of this year's Tour de France. Right up there at the moment at 2:45. Now breathing down his neck. Quintana 14 seconds behind him. Verde, another 2 seconds behind that Van Garderen. Then less than a minute back to Bardet, Richie Porte. So many big name riders, experienced riders, more mature at Grand Tour level, right behind him. If he was to hang on to his place in the GC, or even move up onto the podium, it would be an incredible performance. If he was to drop and finish 9th or 10th, I would still say he's had an incredible debut riding for GC. It's not his first tour, but his first go at trying to ride GC and taking it day by day. Whatever happens, he's had a fantastic tour.
Been a brilliant ride by Adam Yates, but there's plenty still to come. This is Alex Howes at the front of the race, a breakaway group of 4, almost at the top of the climb. The Côte de Fort Echaud, 1 point up for grabs in the race for the King of the Mountains jersey. It's just a Category 4 climb. It's not really a contest. Alex Howes continues to set the tempo. Jeremy Waugh is not going to challenge, and it will be Alex Howes who gets 1 point added to his name in the race for the polka dot jersey.
Well, something there for Cannondale Drapac.
And he's maintained the momentum over the top. He didn't kick the clutch in, flicked the elbow as soon as he got the point. He made the statement of continuing with the pressure right at the front. This is the Chateau of Montchenou, which is a medieval chateau dating back to the 12th century and is now privately owned. And you can see the old fortress wall around the outside of it. A lot of it has been dismantled over the centuries, but the chateau itself, standing right in the middle, still looks as if it is in pristine condition. And it's probably about time to get the cover off the pool and go for a swim. 26 degrees this afternoon. Lars back at the front, followed by Nathaniel Bidhan. Next is Peter Vakoc. And for Team Sky, this is an ideal situation. This is a day for them almost to treat it as a recovery stage up until that last 30 or 40 kilometres where things start to intensify.
Yes, a bit of active recovery, if you can call it that, for 208.5 kilometres. I spoke about the sprinter with the best and the most well-drilled team having the best chance. Now, it's not just about the sprinters and their teams. All of the GC riders we've been speaking about over the last few minutes, them and all their teams are going to be at the front because everybody will know the wind conditions here at the finish. That final 3 kilometres, the 3 kilometre rule, we've spoken about that a number of times. If you crash or puncture, you get the time of the group you're in. But if the race just splits, you lose that time. In 3 kilometres, you may not lose much. They don't want to lose any seconds. We just spoke about how close they are from 4th through 8th at the moment. Nobody wants to lose 5 or 6 seconds. So it's going to be chaos as they turn towards the finish.
The peloton now 1 kilometre away from going over the top of this Category 4 climb. Vasily Katienka is the man at the back in the black colours of Team Sky. And they're about to start the next climb. Once they get out of this town, they're on to the next climb, which again, it's a Category 4 climb. And it's relatively short at just 2.1 kilometres. And only 1 point up for grabs in the race for the King of the Mountains jersey here. Big crowds on the side of the road once again. Martin Elminger with the bidden up, indicating he wants the team car to come up alongside him. Just drops that down for one of the spectators on the side of the road. The locals have come out in force. And all the riders have made it pretty clear after what we saw on Mont Ventoux, when a few spectators went overboard, that they love the spectators on the side of the road. And 99% of them do the right thing. They applaud, they clap everybody that comes through. And they don't want to see that change. It's just that 1% that oversteps the line every now and then. We can't forget that the stage of Mont Ventoux was also on Bastille Day, big festivities, and just maybe a few people might have indulged in the local produce of the crushed grapes that have been fermented for a little bit too long. Jeremy Waugh from FDJ stretches the legs at the front. This is Benedetti from Bora Argon 18. The most experienced rider from this breakaway group, a former winner of the Tour Down Under. And at the back, in the green colours from the Cannondale Drapac, Alex Howes. He has been with the Slipstream organisation all through its various sponsors since it started, which was way back in 2007. Rode well on home soil last year, Alex Howes, at the World Championships, finished in 12th position in the race that was won by Peter Sagan. He's had one crash already. You can still see the damage on his left arm. And he's shown his resilience by getting into the breakaway today.
Good job getting into the break. Probably not the ideal day for a breakaway, especially 4 men against the bunch on what looks to be the final chance reaches Paris on Sunday week. These riders will know they stand very little chance of making it to the finish and fighting it out for the win. But you don't know if you don't go. The Swiss rider in second position here, former winner of Tour Down Under, is always prepared to have a go. Having a go back in the peloton now is Etixx Quickstep. And look at that single file line. Probably more a case of just coming down those winding roads after the KOM rather than a big increase in the pace.
And they're about to approach that small town that we've just seen the breakaway go through. It's going to be safer if it's strung out in single file. The impact of a fall is more significant because they are going faster, but it is safer.
And you see the riders also more prepared to just single out and follow the wheels because they know there's little to no danger of coming into a crosswind once they get out of that village, because the race goes in one direction, due north all day, and that Mistral wind has swung to the north since yesterday. That's why we saw the riders getting hit in the side along the time trial course, the Gorge d'Ardèche. So not as much stress in the bunch. You see the flags flying there, not completely in the face at the moment. It also looks fairly protected compared to the wind out on the rest of the course.
The past three stages, the flags have had the threads torn out of the end of them. It's been going that violently. Today, it is still relatively windy. We'd call it a windy day if we hadn't had the past 3 days. It's just after what there's been, this is reasonably easy.
I'd almost say the past 14 days, Matt. I think this has been the windiest tour I've ever seen. Normally we get 2 or 3 days of high winds that split the peloton. We've seen it so often in this Tour de France, from up in Normandy at the start along the coastline there, and then particularly over the last 3 days, that Mistral wind has thrown a big spanner in the works for many riders and given them a lot harder ride too. So expect to see some riders really start to struggle in the last week because they've been expending a lot of energy on stages where they normally could just sit the wheels and ride the stage out. So it's made it a tougher tour.
This is Benedetti at the front for Bora Argon 18. He's picked up a few points throughout the race this year in the battle for the King of the Mountains jersey, but he's no challenge to Thomas de Gendt. Earlier this season, he managed to win the King of the Mountains classification at Tirreno Adriatico. A big tour that starts the season, really kicks off the season in Italy in March. Jeremy Waugh, he was just backed off this group ever so slightly, and Martin Alminger was making sure that he was keeping an eye on him. He's been a stage winner, Jeremy Waugh, in Paris-Nice, which is also organised by the organisers of the Tour de France. And it always finishes, well, not always finishes, but generally has a stage finish at some point on the Promenade d'Anglais, where we saw that a tragedy on Bastille Day, with the terrorist attack in a truck. So a lot of the riders, it felt very close to home for them, particularly the English-speaking riders. Many of them, when they moved to Europe, lived in Nice or nearby in Monaco. Looks like Benedetti is going to collect the 1 point on offer this time over the top of this Category 4 climb. No challenge from Martin Alminger, the most experienced man in the group. He just lets the Italian drift forward and take the point, because Martin Alminger wants to keep this group organised. Well, this that we're looking at now by Cheval, the ideal palace of Cheval, this was built by a postman, and it took him 33 years to build it. He started by just doing a small little waterfall, and then he just continued to build. He grabbed oyster shells, little rocks from all around the area that he collected throughout his day. There's snail shells in there as well. It took him 30 years to build this, and he wanted to be buried in it, but the local municipality wouldn't allow it. They said, well, you have to be buried in the local cemetery. So then he spent another 8 years building himself his own tomb in a local cemetery. This was in the latter part of the 1800s. He started building this, which he first called a source of life, back in 1879, and he continued to work on it for 33 years. It was his ideal palace, the dream place.
And the building materials, he didn't go down to Bunnings or a hardware store or the building supplies to get what he used. Shells, snails, oysters and stones.
All collected from the local area, the stones and so on anyway.
Yes, Matt, you can see the breakaway just in that little staggered formation, offset to the right of the rider in front, just catching the ideal slipstream. So this will be a little sectional, just push the peloton a little bit from left to right. But then it quickly changes direction again and will generally stay as a headwind until they get up to about the last 3 kilometres. Then it's all crosswind to the finish line.
And I think through that section in the peloton, there's a truce at this point. They know what is still to come. There's a big week of climbing through the mountains before they reach Paris. And Lars Bak, one of the captains of the peloton, leading the charge for Lotto Soudal. It was such a popular stage win for Lars Bak when he collected a victory at the Giro d'Italia 3 years ago. Clipped off the front, managed to win on his own. Not often he gets the chance to have the freedom to target a victory. He's part of the contingent of riders from Lotto Soudal who's extended his contract to coincide with Andre Greipel. Still Jeremy Waugh on the front. We're in number 128. His best result in the stage of the Tour de France was a 3rd place finish. That was back in 2011 into Lord. Thor Hushoff went out, the stage winner, and that time around it was on stage 13. There's Julien Alaphilippe, number 182 at the back of the peloton for edX Quickstep. He won't have to do much work at the back end of today's stage, surely, for Marcel Kittel, after the fall that he had yesterday.
And Julien Alaphilippe, not really one of the lead-out squad within the edX Quickstep team. Looking more for Fabio Sabatini, Ilio Kesa, to help Marcel Kittel into position and lead the sprint out.
Dora Argon 18, they're in the breakaway today, but also just spotted at the back, number 135, Sam Bennett, who was in that nasty fall on stage 1 with Michael Morkov as well, who's since abandoned the race and was the first rider to head home. But he bravely fought on for almost the entire first week. I wonder if Sam Bennett today, if his legs are in a position, if his body's in a position for him to have a full-throttled attempt at the sprint finish. I hope so. He deserves to have his chance.
I hope so for him too, because after all the suffering that he's gone through to get to this point after crashing on stage 1, it'll be a nice reward for him to get a good result, or at least just for his own confidence and to make it worth all that suffering, at least get up there and be able to have a go full throttle, even if it's not a win or a top 3, just to be amongst it again.
Andre Greipel, the German national champion, one of the big favourites for the stage. The situation with Sam Bennett reminds me of Michael Matthews last year. He crashed on stage 3 and he kept plucking away, hoping that he'd recuperate and be in a position to challenge for a stage victory. He didn't quite get there, but I'm sure that that whole experience has served him really well and made him appreciate even more so the stage win this year.
It's done that, and Michael Matthews has said last year, riding through the rest of the tour after stage 3 with 4 broken ribs, the amount of suffering that he did on that tour, he said it's taught me how hard I can actually push myself physically and mentally. So anything I come up against from now on, I've got that experience that helps me. It helps me mentally to know that I can push through something like that.
Making their way through the town of Benaron. And they are still 5 kilometres away from the intermediate sprint.
Turn, but just now flicks out and lets Jeremy Waugh go through. But Elmiger, no, he flicked out and then increased the pace. Here goes Benedetti from the back.
Benedetti opens up, and that does catch Elminger by surprise. So he was closing the gate, Elminger, so as they could only go on one side. That was so as nobody could do what Benedetti did and surprise him as the Italian collects.
Not only surprised them from the back, but had the horsepower to keep opening the gap after he went. Elminger saw it pretty quickly and reacted. Did not make up 1 metre on Cesare Benedetti. Good turn of speed from the Italian. You see him short, sort of stocky build. If you're going to pick a sprinter out of the 4, he's the one you'd say is man most likely. Now, The peloton are now coming to the 1 kilometre to go banner for this sprint. Not a lot of interest just yet back in the peloton, as Ethics Quickstep now on the left-hand side in the blue. They look like they're bringing Marcel Kittel up, and he wants to take some points, but on his wheel in green, Peter Sagan. Behind him, Mark Cavendish. Talking of Cavendish, that's not the sign of a man who's going to pull out of the Tour de France to prepare for the Rio Olympics on the track if he's still going for green jersey points. Brian Coquard is behind Cavendish.
The lead-out train for Marcel Kittel, as Peter Sagan is having a conversation with Mark Cavendish. He's looking very comfortable. Notably, Andre Greipel is missing. He is putting all his eggs in the stage win basket. Well, the others, they're just stepping out of the way and waiting for the sprint to come.
One Lotto Soudal policeman, if you like, on the back of this group, but 4 Ethics Quickstep riders lined up for Marcel Kittel, so a bit of a general repetition, I guess you could say, for the final sprint.
And this is Lars Bak just checking across in the red colours, having a look at the situation. 300 metres remaining. Ethics Quickstep, they start to wind things up. It's Kittel who sits in 3rd spot. And now Peter Sagan is the first to go. Marcel Kittel has been caught slightly on the hop. 150 to go. Sagan trying to minimise the energy expenditure while still getting the points. And he collects 5th place on the intermediate sprint, followed by Kittel, then Cavendish. Next in line was Coquard. So Mark Cavendish, although he was in there and amongst it, he didn't spend any energy.
Mark Cavendish not even getting out of the saddle to take part in the sprint, just rolling in for a few points. Marcel Kittel not prepared to go from a long way out, and that provided Sagan with the opportunity to get the jump up the inside and effectively box Marcel Kittel in a little bit. He knew then it's probably a little bit late, or not too late, but if I'm going to pass him, it's going to require maximum effort, which he's not prepared to do with a stage win on the line. That's what's really important. And I don't think any of those guys really believe they can take green back off Peter Sagan, but sort of just keeping themselves in contention, almost battling for second, just in case something happens to Peter Sagan that means he cannot finish the Tour de France. Then it's an open competition between the rest, because Peter Sagan, he's increased his lead for the green jersey. Already had 90 points over Mark Cavendish. It's extended that to at least 92 now.
Well, they've made the most of this roundabout. It's like a natural theatre to be able to look down upon the peloton. This is Vicioso at the back for the Katusha team. Their team leader, Joaquim Rodriguez, he lost ground yesterday, which is no surprise. He was the worst performed of the riders battling for a top 10 finish.
And I still thought that for Joaquim Rodriguez's capabilities in the time trial, he actually did okay. He gave 4:46. That's a lot, but I've seen him do worse in the same situation in past Grand Tours. A very difficult time trial, but if you're going to be a contender for the overall, you've got to keep those sort of losses down to around 2 minutes, I would say, at the most. And I don't believe Joaquim Rodriguez can get anywhere near the podium in this Tour de France, but possibly a top 10. And once we get into the mountains, he's in his territory.
All the way past the Mont Ventoux, right towards the Bouches du Rhône before it actually gets piled out into the Mediterranean. That, by the way, just down there is the Yons Dam, Le Barrage de Yons. It's 100 meters long, and it's entirely located in the municipality of Veniervaux. And it is in fact built as a controlling dam for the levels of the Rhône. It was built in 1934. The main purpose is to direct the flow of water and control the levels into the Miribel Dam. The main field now crossing over and into the Département of Verlaine. 25 kilometers to go. There you can just see the dam over to the right-hand side there. Quite an interesting dam, and it actually is also used to control the flow into the canal, which is then diverted into a hydroelectric plant not too far away from here. The EDF, Électricité de France, produces an awful large percentage of France's electricity from hydroelectric power. The Miribel Canal, which was founded in 1832, because of the fact that the Rhone River on occasions had actually created a certain amount of flooding, and that's why they decided to build this dam, as they did many other dams down throughout the length of the Rhone, just to control the level and control the flow. The dam itself, the canal itself, was created towards the end of the 1800s. Back with the leaders now, 16 seconds, and that's not much more than about 250 meters. You can see now the speed. They have lifted up the speed in the leading group of 4 riders to about 54 kilometers now, the main field. Well, 280 meters is their advantage, while the peloton is hovering at just about the same speed, waiting for the moment to pull it all back together. It's interesting that it's Mark Cavendish's team who have come to the front, and they're already taking the risk. Again, you have to be very, very careful not to lay too much energy out too early on. Sitting over to the right-hand side of Cavendish, you had all the Lotto riders. They will be starting to look after their man, and that, of course, is Andre Greipel. And Andre Greipel, I spoke to his team before the start of this race, and they said, well, we do have our lead-out team well sorted out when it comes down to the running towards the finish. And one of the integral parts of the lead-out for Team Lotto is Greg Henderson. As you get a chance to see what a beautiful region this is region number 01, and every region in France, every department in France, every 101 of them has its own little number, and this one, of course, is the first number on the list, 101, number 01, sorry.
Well, we're getting into the wetlands of the region now, which makes this a protected area for the fauna and the flora, indeed, of the region. As I say, we've not finished here before. There's the flag showing you the strength of the wind. These poor boys are now down to 19 seconds, and Elminger shakes his head because I think he saw them.
Well, he knows now, Phil, that the writing is very much on the wall there, but we're getting to the fairly critical part of this race. So we're at 23 kilometers to go. In 13 kilometers to go, at 10 kilometers from the finish, that's when really the race, I think, will start to wind itself up, and we'll start to see which of the teams of the sprinters want to take control, because inside of the last 10 kilometers there are only 2 corners, a 90-degree to the left and a 90-degree to the right, so it really is a perfect sprinter's day today.
And they're coming right up behind them now, 21 seconds and holding. They're going to have led this race for about 163 kilometers, a little bit more than 100 miles ahead of the field today, but it's just about over now. And we're twisting and turning, so the wind is going from head to cross at a fairly regular fashion just at this moment in time.
Well, as you can see, it's swinging around a lot because we're zigzagging now up towards the finishing town of Villars-les-Dombes. And currently, they're actually, because of the way the race is twisting and turning, they're picking up rather nasty headwind, as you can see there from the Portuguese flag over to the left-hand side.
They're just showing off because they beat France in the European Football Championships a week ago. The peloton now are going to start changing the whole attitude to the racing today.
Well, just the information that we were picking up, Phil, from all of the teams of the sprinters at the start, they all realise how important it is to have a solid lead-out train down towards the end. You've got Team Dimension data over on the right-hand side. They're all looking after Mark Cavendish, but one of the best lead-out squads over the last few years has been Team Lotto, and they will be looking for a 5-man lead-out with Marcel Seeberg to lead out early on, Deboucher, Roland, and Greg Henderson, the last man, to lead out Greipel.
Almost over for the leaders, Jens Voigt, but the wind is very hard. Can you explain how it is? Because you've ridden the Tour in conditions like this.
Well, we also had the chance this morning to ride the last kilometers of the circuit. So there's a 90-degree turn a little bit after the 6-kilometer mark. And then that leads for 2.5 kilometers into some really strong crosswind. So it is very, very likely that the peloton is going to split up there. So like Christian van der Velde said before, it's going to get a little hairy to get into that corner in a good position in the first place. But in between 3 kilometers to go and 5.5 kilometers to go, that is such a crucial part of today's stage. Basically, the whole stage is going to be decided in this part in the crosswind. So having a good, strong team and a whole lot of riders together with you, it's definitely going to help you. And there I see the advantage for people like Kittel having the strong and experienced team for this behind them.
Wow, well, I'm excited about that turn. I must be honest. It looks about 15 kilometres to that little change of direction at the moment. And they're still doing their best not to catch these four riders as they continue to lead. But it'll be that left-hand turn. We're looking at the diagram on our running books at the moment. It's a long, straight road, very acute angle. It's going to be a tough crosswind there.
Well, the complicated thing is, yes, it's just about exactly on 6 kilometres to go to the finish. There's that 90-degree turn to the left. But not only the sprinters will be trying to get well positioned there, Phil, the overall contenders will be trying to stay at the front of the pack. Well, okay, just 10 seconds is the gap of the four leaders. I mean, in the main field there, you can almost put your hand out and put it on the back of the four-man breakaway. I'm a little surprised, though, to see just sitting at the back here, number 164, because he's one of the guys I was talking about as being an integral part of the lead-out for Andre Greipel. That was Jens de Boucher. Maybe he's going to scramble up to the front in a short while and try to get himself in a position for that lead-out, but they can still always count on the big Marcel Seeberger. He's 1.98 meters tall. He's the tallest man in the Tour de France, and that, in old money, is 6'6". 21 kilometers, and that's going to take these guys now, when you factor in the weather and the wind conditions, it's going to take them about 25 to 26 minutes to get to the line. You can see the average speeds between the main field and the peloton. They're only separated by around about 150 meters, but they've definitely turned it off in the peloton. Just having a look over to the right hand side, you can see the red jerseys. Left hand side is the white and black jerseys of Dimension Data. Here's one of the little turns, but it's not really critical until they get to that left-hand bend at 6 kilometers to go. And then we will see a massive acceleration in the main field, coming from the sprinters teams, but also coming from BMC and Van Garderen and Port Duo, from Team Sky, looking Movistar, looking after Nairo Quintana, because if they really put the hammer down at that point, we could see a similar situation to the situation that occurred on the road into Montpellier a couple of days ago, where even the leaders get caught out and lose some time.
But now it's eyes down for the sprint kings of the Tour de France. The players or the teammates now setting the pace. There's the right-hand sweeper. Katusha really have confidence now in Alexander Kristoff. They've got four riders up there, and Bosenhagen is up there as well for Dimension Data for Cavendish.
Yeah, but not far away. There's the 3 kilometers to go, Bennett. No more corners. It's pretty much a straight run into the finish line now, and Team Katusha are taking control of the peloton over on the right-hand side. But just look behind them, a little bit further back, the black and blue jerseys. They're all communicating Ethics Quickstep. They're waiting to get their lead-out train organised, but waiting till the final few kilometres.
Mark Cavendish is in there as well, near Bosenhagen, his teammate in a different coloured jersey, is champion of Norway. The black jerseys, they're looking to try and take Brian Cockar on the left of our picture. There's a lot of movement now. Riders are off the road here. Well, they've got back on it, but look at all the places. I wasn't sure whether it was or not.
It was because he's wearing the green jersey and the grey shorts. He's gone to the fashion police this afternoon. Well,
it looks like he's still there to me, Paul.
There you go. I'll agree with you on this one.
Well, thank you.
But it looks so much like him because of the grey shorts, but certainly it's very difficult to catch out Mr. Sagan.
Well, I would have thought he'd put him on the grass, he'd come off ahead of the race. He's that good riding a bike. But the wind is hurting all of the riders here. Just being tailed off the back is Wilco Kelderman. He'll lose time. He was amongst the overall boys for a top 10 finish in Paris. A lot of concern there now. Ethics getting control of the race, though, for Marcel Kittel.
Well, this is one, I would think, probably the best lead-out train. We talked about them a couple of days ago, how well organised they were. Once they get up to about 3 kilometres to go, we'll start to see the real serious line-out, as we're now inside of 1.7 kilometres. It won't be very long now before we start to see coming to the front Tony Martin. There he is in second position, Phil, just waiting for the moment to wind it up. He knows exactly what he wants to do. And once Tony Martin has done his long term, then they'll throw it over to Maximiliano Ricchesi, who in person is a very good sprinter in his own right. And the last man, hopefully, if everything works out well for Etixx Quick-Step, will be Fabio Sabatini to do the final lead out. But now Lotto takes control on the left.
And they've washed away Kittel, who's on the last blue rider on the right there, and he's lost a lot of space as it comes to 1 kilometre.
Well, that was pretty aggressive as they came up to the line. There was a few changes of direction. I think it was a fairly regular sprint, though, but Marcel Kittel put his hand up to complain about the movement from Mark Cavendish. I think that was just general moving in the main field, but obviously, Phil, as we look at that, these are all the top men. That's Cavendish there, Kittel with his hand up, and Peter Sagan throws for the line. And in the other white jersey, nice. John Degenkolb. Nice to see him back.
How nice was that?
Hey, nice one. Nice one. Again.
Well, just take a look at this here. That's Kittel going for the line. Cavendish breaks over him. Now, when the camera caught, Cavendish moved, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, difficult to say. Obviously, Marcel Kittel not happy with that. Cavendish moves slightly to the middle, then back over to the right-hand side, and he's got 4 fingers up there for 4 victories. But really nice to see getting up there John Degenkolb. Just a quick look there. I think John Degenkolb got up there in 4th or 5th position, and it's nice to see him back. When you know the story behind his performance, being knocked off, almost losing a finger, almost losing his life in a very nasty accident at a training camp in the southern part of Spain in the early part of the year. A chance there to look at the Parc des Oiseaux. It's a beautiful park. As I said, it's almost 400 hectares of bird watching paradise, and 400 hectares corresponds to around about 1,000 acres. And that big tower you can see in the middle is, of course, one of the watch towers to get a good chance to see 1 or 2 of the rare species of birds that are down here too. So we've got to wait for a few moments to have another look at the finishing line here. But look, as they come around the corner, Cavendish right in the middle there, looking for the win. It's Degenkolb in the white jersey trying to get there, and it's so great to see him back. Sagan comes right up through the middle, and I'm just, well, second, third and fourth, you'll have to go to the photo. Let's have a look here from the side. Cavendish gets up there. On the far side, Christoph second, third. Hazard a guess, while Kittel has to settle for 5th. There was certainly a little bit of movement. I think it was involuntary as we look at this one more time. But you see just going there, slipping backwards. A lot of movement in a sprint like this, and it's all under the control there of Etixx at this point. Cavendish moving up into 2nd place. Degenkolb is nicely there in 3rd. Moving into 4th place is Christoph. Cavendish comes up there, and it looked really as if Kittel was trying to get himself back into the slipstream of Cavendish. He almost lost control of the bike. Oh, the lunge for the line. I would think just over on the left-hand side, that was Alexander Christoph, got himself 2nd place, but it was all really very much in the lunge for the line. Hovering around in the middle there as well, finishing inside of the top 10, the Frenchman, Brian Coquart. Well, I wonder what the referees will say about that one. But for Cavendish, yes, number 4, but maybe more importantly, number 30. Well, he seems to think there's Dougie Ryder, who actually came into our commentary position just a little bit earlier on and said, well, this is it. This is what it's all about.
Cavendish was going almost 2 to the 1 of Marcel Kittel as he went by him. The big German sprinter was already done. That was a protest in frustration as much as it was anything else. Alexander Christoph in 2nd position. The photo for 3rd between Peter Sagan and John Degenkolb, and it was Sagan that got 3rd. Degenkolb 4th, Kittel 5th. Greipel, Coquart, Chimolay, Laporte, Semi Dumoulin. A good sprint into 10th. The race journeys into the Jura. There's barely a flat stretch of road to provide provide to tired legs, and while Chris Froome has a commanding lead, there are no guarantees on terrain like this. Hello and welcome to stage 15 of the Tour de France. The only certainty today is that there'll be plenty of action. Starting in Bourg-en-Bresse, making its way through to Toulouse, it's 160 kilometres. There are 6 categorised climbs on the stage, but there's 10 climbs in total. They get a few bonus ones. And it includes the outside categorisation climb at the Grand Colombier. They descend down to the finish line and then back up the Grand Colombier again, but not all the way to the top, before descending through to the finish itself. Welcome to stage 15 of the Tour de France. Matthew Keaton with you, joined by a man who's won 12 stages in the race, 3 green jerseys. Robbie McEwen, we're into the mountains. We're not talking about the green jersey today. Today, it's all about yellow.
It's all about the fight for yellow. It's all about the big GC contenders and the climbers. But don't speak too soon, Matthew, on saying we're not going to talk about the green jersey, because the man wearing it, Peter Sagan, he's full of surprises, and I wouldn't be overly surprised if he pops himself into a break early on in this stage. But it's not realistically a stage he's going to win. But never say never with Peter Sagan.
He may well try and get in the breakaway, because there's only 3 mountains to get over before the intermediate sprint, and he's had his margin narrowed. It's now down to just a 62-point advantage over Mark Cavendish, which actually can be wiped away pretty quickly.
One intermediate sprint and one finish could effectively put Cavendish in green. I don't expect it.
Inside the last 30 seconds before they roll away, 10 minutes neutral, then the flag will come in, and then the racing will really be on. Chance to look down upon this beautiful monastery, the Church of Saint Nicolas. Bourg-en-Bresse hosting a stage start, and it's hosted plenty of finishes of stages in the Tour de France before, often ones that have proved to be decisive. The last 10 seconds. And there is the green jersey, Peter Sagan, alongside Chris Froome, the overall race leader. They roll away. This moment, they all look relatively relaxed, but Nairo Quintana sitting towards the front. Surely the pressure is building internally for Nairo Quintana. Everybody has been expecting the attacks to come from the great Colombian climber, but he's yet to deliver any major punch. He hasn't really landed anything on the chin of Chris Froome.
Not yet, but at this point in the race last year, he also hadn't landed anything on the chin of Chris Froome. It all happened in that last couple of days. We're still a week away from Paris, but now is when it's got to start happening, because Nairo Quintana, he knows last year, he probably started risking it a little bit too late, making those big attacks and finally taking time. Had he started a little bit earlier, he may have been able to crack Chris Froome. But I wonder if his confidence is up to it, because he tried on the Mont Ventoux and he got dropped.
He said he made a mistake and he went too soon. Thomas de Gendt in the King of the Mountains jersey. He must go in the breakaway today. He must.
And he's starting on the front row because he's wearing that jersey. And even if he was second in that competition, I'm sure he'd be starting on the front row, or at least right tucked in behind it, ready to go again. And he knows that if he can get in the break today and Rafael Maker doesn't, he could effectively wrap up the King of the Mountains jersey on today's stage. There are so many climbs on offer. But he says, you know what? I want to have a man-against-man battle with Maker. I'm happy if he tries to go up the road, because I'll go too. I'd like to race for it.
What's happening here with Chris Froome? He's just gone a little bit further forward. Might be trying to get to the left-hand side of the road to adjust some sort of mechanical problem.
He's on the radio. Seems to be having a bit of computer trouble. Might have to dial a geek.
And hopefully he's got that all sorted out. Here's Geraint Thomas towards the front for Team Sky. He will be so valuable today, Geraint Thomas.
It's one of those stages where it's quite possible that Chris Froome will need to use up every single resource he's got. Every teammate, Thomas, Henao, even early on, Rowan Stannard, to try and control the attacks. Make sure nobody dangerous on general classification slips into a breakaway. But Rowan Stannard, I think we'll find them pretty quickly dropped on a stage like this. All depends on how aggressive it is right from the start and who gets into the moves and how quickly it calms at the peloton. And here's a smiling face at the front of Mark Cavendish. And lucky he passed maths at school, because almost need a degree to count up as high as he needs to count the stage wins he's amassed in the Tour de France. 30. Okay, making it sound more complicated than it is, maybe, but let's just say that's a lot of wins. That's a lot of victory salutes.
Well, he's run out of fingers and toes to count with, so he's had to go in multiples of 10s now. It is extraordinary. 184 starters on the grid today in Bourg-en-Bresse. 185 riders finished yesterday, but Jens de Boucher, the Belgian rider from Lotto-Soudal, as we see one of his teammates, Marcus Seeberg, come to the front. He crashed heavily with Matty Breschel, who abandoned the race, but Jens made it to the finish, but he hasn't made it to the start today.
No, and he's got a fractured shoulder blade is the diagnosis, and a deep cut on his knee as well. So the Belgian is out of the race, but just a sign of how tough these guys are. Got back on, finished the stage with a fractured shoulder blade, a deep cut right on his knee.
I love this map of France, and the yellow, the Jura, that's where we are right now.
And also down in the corner there, Nice. And of course, here in France, officially 3 days of mourning in the country, and a lot of support going out to the city of Nice and the people of Nice.
And stretching to have a look to see if he can spot it. That was Fabio Sabatini from the edX Quick-Step team. Did the lead-out job yesterday for Marcel Kittel, who had to settle for minor placing, and he was understandably disappointed. More on that in a moment. Who goes first? Luke Rowe, the policeman at the front for Team Sky. The tour director, Christian Prudhomme, is just about ready to take the flag away and let racing get started. And the race is officially underway. The flag is in, and everybody's calm for now. But for how long? Andre Greipel yesterday celebrating his 34th birthday. He moves to the front in the white colours as the German national champion. Not sure that Andre Greipel was overly concerned about the fact that it was his birthday yesterday and he missed out. More concerned about the fact that he just missed out. This is Grommet, who gets the honour of being the first to attack on stage 15. Burkhardt responds quickly. Next in line is Julien Vermont, and then, as expected, the leader of the King of the Mountains classification, Thomas de Gendt, is right in the thick of it, and responding to come across, Peter Sagan.
Expected no less from Peter Sagan. When there's an attack, he's going to just go with it, because that's just what he does. The intermediate sprint today comes after 71.5 kilometres of racing and after category 1, 2 and 3 climbs. So pretty tough ask for any sprinter to get to that intermediate sprint and take points, but if there's one man that can, it's the man in green.
This is the leader of the King of the Mountains classification, winning the stage to Mont Ventoux. Thomas de Gendt, he's going to become the answer to a trivia question. Who won the day that Chris Froome ran? But as you mentioned yesterday, he won't care about that. He just knows that he won, and it was Mont Ventoux.
And that's all that really matters to Thomas de Gendt. And what also matters to him is that polka dot jersey as leader of the King of the Mountains competition. And the best defence is attack, according to Thomas de Gendt. But they're not just letting them go. Long, long line forming at the front. And I'm just wondering where Raphael Maker is at this moment, watching de Gendt ride up the road. If he wants to challenge for that competition, he needs to be with him today.
And given that Alberto Contador is no longer here, he will get the green light to do whatever he wants. And the team owner, Oleg Tinkov, he wants the green jersey, which they've got a strong grip on at the moment, but he also wants the King of the Mountains jersey. Julien Vermont is the rider from edX Quick-Step, who has joined Thomas de Gendt at the front. There's not much wind at all today as we're into the Jura. It's fairly calm.
That's Stettiner trying to come across. You said you expected him in the break. He just had a dig going through that roundabout. Still can't quite get himself off the front of that peloton. It was one of the Orica Bike Exchange riders. I think it was Ruben Plaza. Track him or Daryl Impey?
Christopher Juhl Jensen.
You think?
Is my tip.
All right.
The Irish-born Dane who's been pretty quiet so far, but this is a stage where he can play his role. You're pointing to the screen and you're pointing to Steve Cummings in the white colours. Go on.
Off the front or on the back, one of the two. And as guys start to get dropped, I'm sure he'll just still be in last position of the peloton as others go out. He'll just keep filling that gap, just keep riding around people. As these two riders, they are holding that chasing group at bay at the moment. As a little group has got itself just off the front of the peloton. We see from the helicopter shot, they've got about 50 metres. That chase group must be about 10 or 12 riders trying to get across to Thomas de Gendt and Julien Vermont.
Which would be the perfect size group for a stage like this. Virtually the same size group that they had on the stage to Mont Ventoux, and very similar to the size of the group that we saw to Andorra when it was Tom Dumoulin that won the stage. So you can't get away with a group of just 2 or 4 or even 5. You need 10 plus, 10 to 15 on a stage like this to stand any chance of surviving. And you need a group that doesn't have any big favourite for a spot inside the top 10. Peter Sagan it is in the green jersey who closes it down. And there has been a big response from the peloton. This is Brice Filou now in the black colours from Fortunato Vital Concept.
And it looks like Thomas de Gendt's move is going to be in vain because everything is coming back together, albeit in a almost fracturing single file line.
Yesterday's stage winner, Mark Cavendish, the debate still rages. Is he going to go all the way to Paris, or is he going to pull the pin with the view of the Olympic Games? His team director, Roger Hammond, has said, we're focusing on trying to get him to Paris because there's 2 more stages that he can win.
I spoke to him last night. Last night I was a guest on a Belgian talk show, an evening Tour de France show called Vive le Vélo, and they interviewed Mark Cavendish on location at his hotel, and I got to ask him a couple of questions as well. And we talked about the possibility of pulling out of the Tour de France. He said, I'm not thinking about pulling out of the Tour de France. I'm thinking about Paris, and I'd love to win there again. And some people say maybe it's a better preparation to pull out and start doing some track training. He said, but I feel good. If I was to get sick, if I was to get overly tired and really struggle, I may consider it. But at the moment, I feel good. I'm going to stay. That's the plan.
This is Greg Henderson at the back of the peloton for Lotto Soudal. Tough day for the Kiwi. Greg Henderson, he's had a tough couple of years with lots of injuries throughout the off-season, which has postponed his preparation for this year. And it looks as if this might be his last Tour de France. There's no confirmation of him going on next year, and there's been that talk of his retirement. Whatever the outcome is at the end of the year, he's had a brilliant career, Greg Henderson. A career that he had to fight for, but he got there. And he's been a stage winner at the Tour of Spain.
Always been an incredibly hard worker, Greg Henderson. Very focused and been an integral part of a lot of riders' wins over the years in the professional teams he's ridden for. He's ridden with Mark Cavendish, but mostly in service of Andre Greipel. Over the last 6 or 7 years, done a great job as the lead-out man for the big German champion.
Sylvain Chavanel now finds himself at the front. Ilnaz Zakarin is the rider who's behind him in the red colours. And Peter Sagan, ever attentive at the front, just taking a look over the shoulder, seeing if there's anybody else prepared to make a move. Katusha have clearly got a plan. They've fallen short with their sprinter. That was yesterday with Alexander Kristoff. Hoping today with Joaquim Rodriguez. Chavanel now decides it's time to go. The first climb itself is only 6 kilometres long, and that tops out when they're at the point of having covered 23 Ks, so with 137 Ks to go. But there's a few lumps before they actually get there. And it's quite a steep climb once they're onto it, 8%. This one home for Lotto Soudal. Well, not quite drive it home, but split it open. He's looking to make the most of the little gap that they've got on the main field. And they're still 2 kilometres away from officially starting the first climb of the day.
This is the second hill of the stage, and it was a hill that went up, very short descent, and then kicked up again before a sharp little descent to the foot of the first climb, the Category 1. Tony Galopin running out of time to build much of a buffer before they get onto that Category 1 climb.
Once they get onto that climb, it's 2.3 kilometres until they get to the bottom of the climb. Team Sky would really want things to start to settle down.
So would the sprinters.
all be hoping that a break that is containable gets established. This is the first group that is now losing contact, and Lee Howard in the white colours is amongst them.
Well, Galopan, he is opening up the gap. 2 riders trying to come across. Navadauskas is one of those, an AG2R rider, but behind them there was still more reaction coming from the peloton. So Tony Galopan, the only one so far to get a gap to speak of in this stage, but I'm sure he'd rather be out there with a few riders rather than just on his own.
He has been a stage winner in the past. He's had a brief stint in the yellow jersey. And we've seen a fair bit of his uncle, Alain Galopin, in the team car as one of the sports directors for Trek Segafredo. And today their big hopes rest with Bauke Mollema, who very quickly is becoming the closest challenger, the real rival. Strong on the stage to Mont Ventoux, Bauke Mollema. He bridged across to Froome and Port.
And he was also the fastest to get himself up off the ground, grab his bike and keep moving towards the finish line, bike and all, as opposed to Chris Froome, who was wearing out his cleats, and I'm sure they bolted on a new set for the next day after that couple of 100 metres on foot. Is Galopin still eking out that gap, and those 2 riders starting to get a small gap over the peloton.
We're heading towards the Swiss border, and we're in the Jura Mountains at the moment, in the department of the Ain. And this is the beautiful river that runs some 200 kilometres, and it's got its source back in the Burgundy region. Looks absolutely stunning. So too does the road alongside it. Beautiful roads these for cyclo-touring as well, not to race, just to go and enjoy riding. And once we get to the Grand Colombier and then the Lassettes to the Grand Colombier, the last 2 climbs of today's stage, you're going to see Mother Nature at its very best. The switchbacks on that final climb are breathtaking.
And that's exactly what Lassettes means, all those hairpin turns. Remember, last year the riders tackled the Lassettes de Montvernier with its 18 hairpins in 3.4 kilometres. Maybe not quite as many hairpins on the Lasset de Colombier, but certainly spectacular in its own right.
A little tough at the back of the peloton.
Tony Martin across on the right-hand side there, number 185 in the blue from Ethics Quickstep. Thomas de Gent, well, he has met his match so far, trying to get in the break, but now it's a teammate, Tony Galopan, who is off the front. So de Gent decided to roll the dice right from kilometre 0, try and get a gap before they hit the first big climb. But now down the back, and not in a position now to get himself into the break unless he has a very swift recovery.
He's paying the price for being so aggressive so soon.
Navadauskas also dropping back on the right-hand side in that white jersey of the Lithuanian champion. Tony Galopan fighting to get this gap, but the peloton not prepared to let anybody ride off on their own. Too many riders trying to get themselves in the break, jump across, and just stretching out at the front. I spotted Serge Paul is at the front there from Dimension Data, second on the Mont Ventoux stage.
This is Reinhard Jensi van Rensburg at the back. One of the riders who was supporting Mark Cavendish yesterday. Lars Bak is slipping the wrong direction. De Gent in trouble in the polka dot jersey. Yesterday's birthday boy is there, Andre Greipel. This is where they need to get themselves organised, as the former winner of the race, Vincenzo Nibali, is now coming through to the front. Alberto Lasada is the rider behind him in the red colours from Katusha.
We spoke about it just before. What should Nibali be doing in this race? Should he be staying with Aru? And I said it, Vincenzo Nibali should be able to decide for himself what he thinks is best tactically, and also for he himself. And honestly, back in the bunch, there's not much he can do there for Fabio Aru, particularly in the first 3/4 of the stage. Why not get in the break? And he thinks exactly that.
Vincenzo Nibali, followed by Serge Pauls. It is then Alexei Villimos. Alberto Lasada is next in line from Katusha. They've now officially started the climb. 6 kilometres to the top. Serge Pauls, second on the stage to Mont Ventoux behind Thomas de Gent. He's recovered a little bit better than the leader of the King of the Mountains classification. Villimos, a stage winner last year to the Mur de Bretagne. and two riders getting in the thick of it from Katusha. The other one that was up there in the red was Ilnar Zakharin.
And another man in red I saw, I think that was Danny Navarro, third on the stage to Chalet Renard on the Mont Ventoux. He was in the break there with De Gent and Poles. Katusha very present at the front of the peloton. Zakharin in the break, and his teammate right on the front. That is Zakharin on the front of the peloton, in fact. As Vuillermoz drives the pace with Poles and Nibali in his wheel.
Crunch time for this group to get away. FDJ coming across. Surely that is Sebastian Reichenbach, as the reaction is coming from Rafael Majka, who's trying to bridge across.
He has bided his time. He has not been lured out by Thomas de Gent early on the stage. Majka running second in the King of the Mountains competition. And now he said, I'm going to wait till it's the real deal, and then I'm going to